I don't think anything that we're talking about today is high on her list. The whole country is going to be like, you want to know the truth? It'll be like Detroit. Our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president. You're going to have a mess on your hands. You watch Detroit. Detroit, for 40 years ago, I've been hearing about Detroit's coming back. Never came back.
It's so great to have Elissa Slotkin on the show. Great to see you again, Elissa. You're, of course, running for the U.S. Senate in Michigan. We'll talk about that race in a second. But I would love for you to draw the contrast between Donald Trump's dark vision for America, his dark vision of Americans, which we saw on full display as he was bashing Detroit, and compare that to the hope and the optimism you felt on that stage with your former boss, President Obama. I think Eminem was there as well. Let's roll the clip.
Vote. Put down your phone and vote. Vote for Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States. Vote for Tim Walz as the next vice president of the United States. Vote for Elissa Slotkin and this whole incredible Michigan Democratic ticket. Get your friends and family, neighbors, co-workers to do the same. Because if enough of us make our voices heard, we will leave no doubt about the outcome of this election. We will leave no doubt about who we are and what America stands for. And together we will keep building a country that is more fair and more just and more equal and more free. That is our job, Detroit. That is our job, Michigan. That's our responsibility. Let's get to work. Thank you, Detroit. Thank you, Michigan.
The emotive difference couldn't be starker, much less the policy difference. Like, there's just a different feel for what these two campaigns are going to bring to the leadership of this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really been, the Trump campaign and the other side of the aisle is really sort of aggressively pushing this dark vision, right? Purposely making people feel that, it's the end and it's desperate and it's, you're going to be in trouble if things go the other way. Kind of this zero-sum approach to politics that we've seen them use. And then divisive, right? Just splitting communities apart, making people tense around each other and angry about each other. And so, it is the exact opposite. And not just of someone like a President Obama or, the energy that we've been seeing around the Democratic Party and in the Harris campaign, but also sort of like an anomaly of history, right? I mean, it doesn't matter whether we've had Democrats or Republicans running for office. Typically, it's a positive, hopeful vision about America. And it's actually one of the most unifying things, right? Because patriotism and loving the country is kind of universal for most people. So it is sad to see. And what I you and I both know from time in other parts of our careers, that leadership climate is set at the top. Yeah. And so if the nominee is talking in these dark ways, we shouldn't be surprised when my neighbors, here in Michigan, are saying the same thing. So it's really, to me, dark and also irresponsible and a complete break with most of American history.
And there's a really ominous subtext, because you're right about the historical observation that this is how winning campaigns usually operate. They're hopeful, they're optimistic. That's how you grow a movement. That's how you grow a party historically. I think what we might be seeing in the Republican Party is no attempt to grow the movement, no attempt to build a stronger party, but just a revanchism, focusing on the most extreme elements, and that's how you animate them. And I think it portends a future and how they would govern, not for the majority of Americans, but for the angriest few.
Yeah. And we don't have to guess. I mean, right. I mean, we went through the 2016 election cycle. I was not in politics. I don't think you were in politics at that time. And I remember just how different in tenor and tone that campaign was. And then Trump won, and he won here in Michigan and surprised the heck out of us here in Michigan. But I remember being at the Pentagon, finishing up my time at the Pentagon, and transitioning to not one, not two, but three different Trump transition teams because they kept getting fired. And we'd do these classified briefings and then they'd be fired. But then there was this hope that on Inauguration Day, Trump would do what pretty much every other president in the United States has ever done, which is say, hey, campaign is the campaign. Now I govern for all Americans. We're all one team, one fight, And so even though Trump had been pretty crazy in the campaign, it was like, here we go. And I remember watching that speech, and it was the exact opposite. It was splitting and dividing people and making clear that he was only governing for some and not for others. So we don't have to guess. That's not an open question.
And this darkness that we pick up in every Trump rally is reflected in the policy prescriptions as well. I mean, Project 2025 is there for us to see. In a way, it's a gift for Democrats because usually the far right is cynical enough to hide their ambition, but they wrote a 1,000-page document laying it out for all of us to see. Yeah. What happens if they regain the Senate and if, God forbid, Trump regains the White House?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, you know how bad it is when Trump and Vance are trying to back away from it. Just as a friendly reminder, J.D. Vance wrote the foreword to Project 2025. So any idea that, this was not written with the full endorsement of these two is just kind of crazy. Look, I tell people, go look at the table of contents and whatever issue you're interested in, just go read that chapter. Right? No one's going to read 1,000 pages, but if you're an educator, go look at what they're going to do to the Department of Education. If you're, someone who cares about the environment, go read these sections. The one that I'm focused on, and I can imagine you are, just being former military, is the specific declarations about how to use the uniformed military on American soil. Right? I mean, I think they have been open about the fact that they would use active duty military to do whatever their plan is on the border, including potentially mass deportations. They have been clear that they see the violence happening in certain cities as qualifying as, the quote insurrection act, and therefore sending uniformed military into cities like Chicago is not beyond the pale. And then putting down civil disobedience. I mean, which again, we've already seen Lafayette Square back in 2020. They used uniformed military to move, peaceful protesters so that Trump could have a photo op. And I think for those of us who have been around the military our whole lives, that is such a break with everything that we've been taught about the delicate, careful role of the U.S. military in our politics, frankly, the non-role, hopefully, that's the one that to me speaks to the core problems of this plan, among many others.
It's Ken Harbaugh. Need to take a quick break here because I wanted to let you know that I have finally decided to take the plunge and figure out social media. The Ken Harbaugh Show is now up on TikTok and Instagram and Reels and Threads. I've got a great team pulling all this content together. Please check out the links in the show notes and follow the Ken Harbaugh Show pretty much everywhere. Thanks, as always, for the amazing support. None of this would be happening without you. And as awful as that misapplication of military force was in the first Trump term, we know it is only going to be worse in the second. I've participated in a number of war games planning this out, and the pushback we always get is, look, we had generals to stop his worst impulses, and the bayonets were never fixed, right? Mm-hmm. The barricades were never charged. But we now hear him saying out loud that he wants Hitler's generals working for him. And we know there are lists of loyal Trump generals that would replace all of those higher echelon positions, and the safeguards wouldn't be there in a second term.
Yeah, I think, I've written myself, and Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill from New Jersey, who's also former military, has written to the Secretary of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and all the service secretaries, asking these questions, like basically, do you understand and can you affirm that there is a constitutional way to reject an illegal order to the military? And that you, the service secretary or the chairman, may actually have to make that decision, right? If they tell you to go put down peaceful protests with active duty military, do you understand that by the Constitution, that's an illegal order and you can say no? Never in my life did I think that I'd have to ask that. But you're right. I believe in the people who are in those senior roles now. I don't know if they're swapped out and someone else is brought in, what they do. But what I will say is I watched in that episode around Lafayette Square, the role of the retired officer corps, right? You know, they're a senior 4-star general is very influenced by his former mentors, his former bosses, his former, commanders. And when they all came out in a very bipartisan way or nonpartisan way and said, hey, that's just not okay. Right. That to me is what really changed people like Mark Milley and Mark Esper, secretary at the time, to say, you know what, I apologize. I mean, they both apologized. So I think there's a role here for retired officers to speak up for the values that they were trained in. And because we may need them, literally.
Yeah, I agree with you. Here is where the problem lies for me. The military is not supposed to be that check and balance. This is an example of a broken system. We're supposed to have a Supreme Court that doesn't offer blanket immunity to a president committing crimes under his official powers. We're supposed to have a separate legislature, co-equal branch of government that checks the authoritarian impulses of a president. We're at a point now where it is left to the military, and in some cases, single uniformed individuals to stop the authoritarian impulses of a wannabe dictator. Exact quote from General Milley, not putting words in his mouth. And that is a terrifying place to be. But I know you got to go. I want to end on a more positive note. How is Michigan feeling? How are Michigan Democrats feeling? How's the home stretch looking for you?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's going to be close.
Yeah.
Swing states. I mean, if anyone tells you you should like put your feet up and relax, they don't know what it's like to be in a swing state. Right. So it's going to be a nail biter, and it'll probably take us a good day, 24 hours to make sure we count the votes and we know what's going to happen. And so it's kind of hold on to your seat a little bit. Obviously, turnout once Kamala Harris was fleeted up to the top of the ticket is back to normal levels. We hope even beyond normal levels, but certainly it's back. And now we're in our classic like independent voters, swing voters, split ticket voters. Where are they going to go? And for me, what's really been interesting is to watch what I call the like secret woman's vote or the silent woman's vote. We just have so many signs of women in red areas, Republican areas, probably not even telling their husbands or their kids or their neighbors how they're going to vote. But just saying privately, you know what, in the privacy of the voting booth, I can't put Trump back in power. We're seeing a lot of that. It's amazing. And, I think as someone who's won in Republican leaning districts, this is really essential to what we need to do here in another 2 weeks. And we see those positive signs. But man, if we don't run through the tape, if we don't work, every ounce, every muscle to the bone, we're not going to win. And that's a very real reality.
Well, Elissa, I think we are going to win. And I think a large part of that is your campaign. Such an honor to have you on. Please thank your team for me. I know they are managing your schedule down to the second at this point. Let's run through the tape.
Thanks, Ken. Great to see you.